Central Asia, as its name suggests, is located in the middle of the Asian continent and stretches from the Caspian Sea to northwest China and northern Afghanistan. Due to its geographical location on the Silk Road, Central Asia has been a target for many empire-seeking armies, such as the Turks, the Mongols, the Arabs, and the Russians. As a result of the infusion of various cultures, Central Asian culture has changed significantly. In 2nd century BC, Central Asia became a homeland for Turkic nomadic tribes who moved out of their homeland, which is now Mongolia, in search of new pastures for their livestock. The migration of the Turkic nomadic tribes played a profound role in shaping Central Asian history and culture. In the 8th century, the Arabs consolidated their power, converting originally pagan Turkic tribes into Islam, though many Mongol Turkic tribes continue their paganist practices. During the Arab rule, Arabic was both the language of religion and academic circle in the region. However, the majority of the population continued speaking various dialects of Turkic and Persian languages. Central Asian cities became learning centers in the Islamic world. Central Asian scholars such as mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, known in the Western world as Algorithmi, in the field of mathematics, he has also been titled the father of algebra. Ibn Sina, known also as Avicenna, who has created a corpus of works on medicine, philosophy, astronomy, and physics. Al-Farabi was a philosopher-scientist, cosmologist, mathematician, and music scholar. However, despite the great accomplishments of its scholars, Central Asia remained an illiterate society, mainly consisting of traders, merchants, and herdsmen. The Mongol invasion of Central Asia occurred by the unification of the Mongol and Turkic tribes on the Mongolian plateau in 1206. The next and last conqueror of Central Asia were the Russians, who have altered the everlasting religious, cultural, and linguistic characteristics of Central Asia. The Russian conquest of Central Asia can be roughly divided into two periods. The first occurred between 1731 and 1854, during which the Russian Empire began to spread Russian language and culture in the region through a network of all Russian and Russian native schools. The Tsar's empire crystallized their expansion in the region by seizing nomad lands in their provinces and distributing the unused lands among Russian settlers. The second period of the Russian expansion of Central Asia started with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and continued until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1992. During this period, Central Asia has undergone tremendous changes. By the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries, Russia incorporated most of the territory of Central Asia, forming the Turkestan Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic in 1918. Initially, Turkestan Socialist Federative Republic, which later became Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Tajik, Turkmen, and Uzbek Soviet Socialist Republics, which today are known as Soviet Central Asia. Prior to the Soviets, the majority of the population was illiterate, including Central Asians. One of the first tasks that the Soviets took on was the eradication of illiteracy throughout the newly annexed countries. During this campaign, all citizens aged 8 to 50 years old were required to learn to read and write, either in their native language or in the Russian language. It is interesting to point out that as a result of Lenin's internationalist outlook, in the early years of the Soviet Union, the party actively promoted the development of native languages. After Lenin's death, since there was no legal official language, the Soviets needed a lingua franca, which seemed to serve two functions: to run the country smoothly and unite all ethnic groups, as language was one of the significant traits that define national identity, especially in multi-ethnic countries such as the USSR. However, to a larger extent, the intention was not to unify people as Soviet citizens, but to Russianize Central Asian people. In the late 1930s, therefore, Latin was replaced by the Cyrillic script for all Central Asian languages. Another significant step taken by the Soviet Union in the 1920s was the liberation of Central Asian women. Women were allowed to participate in socio-political and labor work, thereby elevating their status not only as women, but also as equal members of the society. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, Stalin launched his first 5-year plan, which aimed at transforming the Soviet Union into an industrialized country through industrialization and collectivization of agriculture. This period was a tragic page in the history of Central Asia. A large number of livestock was slaughtered to supply the established quota for meat, which led to a man-made famine in Central Asia, particularly in Kazakhstan in the early 1930s. From the late 1930s and until his death in 1953, Stalin, fearing a social uprising caused by forced sedentarization, collectivization, kulikization, and famine, launched a large-scale persecution of thousands of innocent people. They were falsely accused of various political crimes, such as espionage, sabotage, and anti-Soviet propaganda. The victims of such accusations were shot immediately or sent to labor camps. This campaign reached its highest peak in 1937 and 1938, when hundreds of Central Asia intelligentsia were falsely accused and killed by the NKVD. During the 1950s and early 1960s, the Soviets built plants and factories in Central Asia. And as heavy industry grew, people from other parts of the USSR moved to Central Asia as experts and trainers. Throughout this period, through education and vocational training, Central Asians, as the main workforce in heavy industry, learned how to operate machines and technology. The Soviet authorities viewed education as the key to socio-economic change and the establishment of a communist society. Starting from the early 1920s and through the 1950s, the Soviets accomplished remarkable results, transforming once indigenous people into educated citizens. In the 1950s, more and more Central Asians entered higher educational institutions, where Russian was the language of instruction. Therefore, the majority of Central Asians saw the benefits of Russian for social and economic mobility and strived to master Russian. This led to less people interested in learning their native languages. While it was possible to attend school with native language instruction, having socio-economic mobility meant mastering Russian. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Central Asia was heavily influenced by Russian culture and language. This led to the emergence of a generation of Central Asian people who were unable or unwilling to speak their native languages. This also led to the loss of culture due to the fact that language is an important channel through which culture is transmitted from one generation to the next generation. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, all Soviet Union republics began questioning their historical and cultural backgrounds. After gaining their independence, Central Asians questioned their history, culture, identity, and language, and searched for a way to restore what they lost during the Soviet rule. The Soviet Union have accomplished incredible achievements within 70 years. These include free education on all levels, free healthcare, women's liberation, and the infrastructural development in the region we see today. However, it came at the price of losing the region's unique cultural traits and values. By culture, we mean in the broader sense of the word, not only tangible culture, such as arts, food, traditional clothes, but intangible cultures such as beliefs, spiritual values, and language. One would think that after gaining independence, our native culture and language would be celebrated. In fact, after 25 years, Russian traditions and language are still dominant in parts of the region, and now Western influences are favored among the young people of Central Asia. Given the current trend in Central Asia, will there be Asian culture in the world culture mosaic?